In the spring of 542, the most powerful man in the world woke up with a fever. There was a swelling in his groin, hard and hot to the touch, the size of an egg. His physicians would have recognized it immediately, because by then half his capital had the same swelling. The man was Justinian, Emperor of Rome, or what was left of Rome, and he had caught the plague that was killing his own city at a rate no one could count. For a few days, the question that hung over the entire Mediterranean world was simple. If the emperor dies, who is left to rule the end of the world? He did not die. But something did. To understand what arrived in Constantinople that year, you have to go back to the man who watched it happen. His name was Procopius, and he was the emperor's own historian, a careful, skeptical writer who was physically present in the city while it emptied. What he wrote is one of the most harrowing eyewitness accounts to survive from the ancient world, and for 15 centuries it was almost the only thing we had. The disease, Procopius wrote, began near Egypt at the port of Pelusium in 541. From there it moved along the grain ships. The same ships that fed the empire now carried the thing that would hollow it out. It reached Constantinople in the spring of 542. And then, he says, it did not stop. The symptoms were always the same, a sudden fever that seemed mild. Then within a day or two, the swellings in the groin, the armpit, beside the ears. Some victims fell into a deep coma, others into a violent delirium convinced someone was chasing them. Many died within days. Some survived with withered limbs or no memory of who they were. And here's the detail that unsettled Procopius most. The doctors could find no logic to it. The strong died, and the frail lived. Those who nursed the sick were sometimes spared entirely. There was no rule, no pattern, no defense. What he describes next is not medicine, but the unmaking of a city. The markets emptied. Work simply stopped. Bakers, porters, clerks, all of it. A metropolis of 500,000 people fell so quiet, he says, that you could walk its great avenues and meet almost no one. And the dead outpaced the living's ability to bury them. The customary rites collapsed first. No processions, no mourners, no proper graves. Bodies were carried to the sea walls and thrown into the hollow towers of the fortifications until they overflowed, and the smell drifted back over the ramparts into the streets. Justinian, before he himself fell ill, had to appoint an official whose only task was to dispose of the corpses of strangers. When a society stops burying its dead by name, something more than bodies is being lost. Procopius made a claim about the scale that has echoed ever since. At its peak, he wrote, the plague was killing 10,000 people a day in Constantinople alone. The burial grounds filled. The bodies were stacked in the towers of the city walls and left there. And this, remember, is a bigger city than any in Europe would be again for 1,000 years. To feel what was at stake, you have to know what Justinian was in the middle of doing. He had spent his reign trying to put the Roman Empire back together. His great general Belisarius had already torn North Africa back from the Vandals, and was fighting to wrench Italy from the Goths. The city of Rome itself had changed hands. For the first time in generations, a single emperor in Constantinople could imagine ruling again from the Bosphorus to the shores of Spain. The plague arrived in the middle of that dream. And in the traditional telling, it is exactly here that the dream dies. The armies thinned, the taxes that paid them dried up, and the reconquered West slipped away almost as quickly as it had been won. That is the story we inherited. A pandemic that killed perhaps a third of the people it touched. By some old estimates, 25 to 50 million dead across the empire. A blow so severe that it broke Justinian's dream of reuniting the Roman world. drained his armies, emptied his treasury, and helped push the ancient world across the line into what we would later call the Middle Ages. The plague in this telling is where antiquity ends. For 1500 years we believed it, and then twice over the story cracked open. The first crack was a gift. In a modest early medieval cemetery in Aschheim in Bavaria, 1,000 miles from Constantinople, a quiet farming settlement, archaeologists recovered teeth from 6th century graves. In 2013, scientists extracted DNA from inside those teeth and found it Yersinia pestis, plague, the same bacterium that would later cause the Black Death. For the first time, the thing Procopius described was not just a story. It had a name, a genome, and a location. And the genome held a surprise. This strain sat on a deeper, older branch of the plague family tree than the medieval one, a separate arrival, a first pandemic distinct from the more famous one to come, its lineage now apparently extinct. Science had confirmed what it was. Which brings us to the second crack, because confirming the pathogen did not confirm the catastrophe. What if the story we've told for 15 centuries is mostly Procopius' story? And Procopius was right to move you, not to count? This is the argument a group of historians began making in earnest. They went looking for the fingerprints a mass death should leave. Not in one dramatic eyewitness, but in the boring, honest records that don't exaggerate. Coinage, tax papyri from Egypt, loaths in their timing, pollen in the soil which should show farmland going wild if the farmers all died, and most direct of all, the graves themselves. If a third of the empire died, the ground should be full of plague. It isn't. At Aschheim and a nearby cemetery, archaeologists excavated close to 2,000 graves and found the plague bacterium in only 11. The papyri show Egyptian life carrying on. The coins keep being minted. The catastrophe that was supposed to have ended the ancient world left, in the physical record, a remarkably light footprint. And so these historians made an uncomfortable suggestion that the plague of Justinian may have been real and frightening and far smaller than the number we've all been repeating. Not everyone agrees. Other scholars hold that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, that a fast-moving plague can kill enormous numbers and leave almost nothing behind, and that the written sources across multiple languages and regions are not so easily dismissed. The debate is live and unresolved right now. And that is the strange place that this story leaves us. We have the emperor's fever. We have the historian who watched the towers fill with the dead. We have the bacterium's own genome pulled from a farmer's tooth after 1,500 years. We have more hard evidence about this plague than about almost anything else in the 6th century. And we still cannot agree on the one thing that matters most. Whether it was a hinge on which history turned, or a terror that time has magnified in the retelling. It arrived, we should remember, into a world already reeling. Just 5 years earlier, in 536, the sky had darkened. A veil of volcanic ash had dimmed the sun and chilled the harvests across the northern hemisphere, the beginning of the coldest stretch in centuries, a hungry, weakened world, and then into it, the plague. Whether those two blows together truly ended antiquity, or whether we have simply arranged them into a story because we like our catastrophes to have meaning, is the question underneath the question. Because in the end, this was never only about a disease. It is about how we decide what the past was. A pandemic leaves behind bodies and coins and DNA, but it also leaves behind a story, and the story is the part we argue over. Every age looks back at the plagues of the past and reads its own fears into them. We inherited Procopius's 10,000 a day, and we believed it, because a world-ending plague is, in its terrible way, easier to hold than the truth we may actually have to live with, that history does not always tell us how much anything mattered, that sometimes all it hands us is a fever, a swelling, a number we can't trust, and the long silence of everyone who was there.